Witness, eternal God, O witness that from this hour I will do what one man can do to drive out this curse of slavery from my land. George Selby, Uncle Tom's Cabin. 1851, the American author Harriet Beecher Stowe published her world-famous novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Her book was printed and sold in the United States and Great Britain in 1851 to 1852, and has been published in 70 languages from its publication to present day. Her book was written with such abolitionistic spirit that it became an important contributor to the start of the Civil War, changing the lives of slaves and converting the views of those who read the book in the North. Harriet Elizabeth Beecher Stowe was born June 14, 1811 in Litchfield, Connecticut. As a child from the famous congressional minister, Lyman Beecher, she was exposed to slavery. Growing up, Harriet heard cruel stories of separation between mothers and their children. Once, when Harriet traveled down to Kentucky after moving farther south for college, she witnessed a mother and her child being separated from each other. The brutal moment caused Harriet to be overwhelmed with pain. Most recently, she lost her 18-month-old son, Samuel Charles Stowe, to cholera 4 months before. As the memory plays in her head, Harriet got inspired to write the novel. She began interviewing plantation workers, got the truth from former slaves, and employed a fugitive slave into her home. Although publishing novels like The Mayflower and Old Town Folks, her novel Uncle Tom's Cabin truly began the climax of her writing career.
In 1852, at Brunswick, Maine, Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. This novel went worldwide, and it eventually changed America forever in the minds of the people. The novel was a big hit in Great Britain with over 1.5 million copies sold in the first year. And over in America, over 30,000 copies were sold in the first year. Uncle Tom's Cabin has about 45 chapters and particularly directed for white readers in the North by vividly dramatizing the experience of slavery. Harriet, the author, traveled around to different plantations. In the Shelby plantation in Uncle Tom's Cabin was inspired by a plantation down south in Kentucky. She used a former slave, Josiah Henson, and he was referenced as Tom in the novel.
Josiah Henson was an individual who demonstrated extraordinary courage. He tried to help other people, especially whites in this country, to understand the reality of slavery.
After the novel became a huge sensation, it achieved worldwide popularity with its gruesome truth on the situation that is going on down south.
Reactions of the controversial book varied throughout the country. The South was mostly appalled by the book. They tried to defend their beliefs that owning slaves is normal and that it was substantially better for the Southern industry.
In the South, the book was banned. And if you were caught selling the book, you were either going to be killed or thrown in prison. There was tremendous fear that this book would make a difference.
The North, however, concluded that slavery is unjust to moral values and that it is by their rights to live freely. One example of this controversy comes from a famous abolitionist, John Brown, who read Harriet's book and was disgusted to find out what slaves go through daily. He believed it was important to realize how putrid slavery was and to learn to treat everyone with respect despite their race. Because of this, Brown ended up giving the book to his youngest daughter, Annie Brown, so she could read the truth.
The book struck at our emotions as a nation, and it made us see ourselves. It was our emotional mirror, and it prompted some individuals to rethink how they thought of slavery.
After the publication of Uncle Tom's Cabin, Abraham Lincoln believed that Harriet was one of many people who provoked the start of the Civil War. Although it was not all Harriet's fault, Lincoln still wanted to meet the person who finally pushed the limits of people's ignorance in the North. When they met, the first thing that President Lincoln said to Stowe was, "So you're the little woman who started this great war." She later described the meeting as funny. Their meeting later was sculpted into an iron statue on both sides of the Connecticut River, just like how her words sculpted the minds of many people.
But how did she do it? The answer is by taking advantage of the heart. Harriet created the book as a gateway into the realities of slavery through the eyes of its victims. The mother's child being sold away, a boy watching helplessly as his sister was whipped, and the fugitive slave Eliza and her baby fleeing from the slave hunters across the Ohio River.
And it was said that when the novel was put on stage, there was not one dry eye when Eliza reached the other side of the river. And Harriet knew that if she could get that response from her readers, she didn't need to make arguments about slavery.
She realizes that the way to do this was by playing on the heartstrings. You don't do it by playing on the outrage. You do it by convincing them that there are human beings in peril.
During the peak of sales, publicity started to call out that Harriet retracted many things she wrote in Uncle Tom's Cabin, but this statement was false. Yet she did have to write a new version because of the derogatory language. That is why there is a female version of Uncle Tom's Cabin, known as Aunt Jemima. Over 160 years after it was published, it was created into multiple live theater productions, which was first performed on June 5, 1851, at the Washington National Opera. The play was later adapted into 9 different silent films.
Years after Uncle Tom's Cabin was released, and when the war finally ended, President Abraham Lincoln declared that slavery was now abolished. In overwhelming excitement, Harriet stormed outside of her home in Brunswick, Maine, and started to dance until her feet went numb. With the help of her book, she brought attention to the injustice of slavery and helped push the country into wanting freedom for all people, no matter their race. She broke through the barriers of slavery, finally showing people that even though you might have a darker skin tone than someone else, it doesn't mean they aren't any different than someone with a lighter complexion. Harriet's book helped achieve that and became the #1 bestseller in the US. Harriet died on July 1st, 1896. And President Lincoln was assassinated on April 15, 1865.